But from the point of view of the NTSB, nothing suspicious there. Garage doors were open, even though owners had not opened it. Oh, nothing suspicious there. The smoke was whitish blue, typical of an electrical fire, not a kerosene-based plane fire. Nothing suspicious there. The fuselage burned for 7 hours. It reduced the plane to charcoal. Nothing suspicious there. Do you know how many words there are in the 63-page NTSB final report? 3. Post-impact fire. And yet this fire was extraordinary. By far the most stunning aspect. The wings had even separated from the fuselage, and it's the wings that are full of fuel, not the fuselage. Nothing suspicious there. And then we have witnesses hearing what sounded to them like gunshots, multiple gunshots. One of whom, Rod Allen, said after consideration, it sounded to him as though they might have been coming from inside the plane. The FBI told him not to talk about it. Nothing suspicious there. And when John Costello and I went through the 2,300 pages of reports upon which the NTSB's 63 pages were allegedly based, we found that they had brought in a special company to consult on the propellers because the engines were set below idle. And therefore the plane would have had no forward thrust. Nothing suspicious there. That plane had a glide ratio of 1 to 50. That meant for every 100 feet that it could drop vertically, it could continue gliding 1,500 feet. For every 100-foot drop, 1,500 feet with no power at all. So we have these anomalies plus another that John discovered, namely in the melted area of the ice in the atmosphere. In the ice level of the atmosphere, there was a melted area that was a meteorological anomaly that, for the FBI again, nothing suspicious there. And how did the FBI show up so promptly? Rick Walden was the St. Louis County Sheriff. Saw men from the Rapid Response Force right here in St. Paul he knew personally. When he showed up at 1:30, he asked them how long they had been there. They told him they'd been there since noon. I asked Gary Oldham, the airport assistant manager, how long they'd been there, and he said, well, he'd been on the phone, but they'd been there at least since 1 o'clock. And yet when the issue arose, Paul McCabe, the FBI spokesman, said they had shown up at 3:30, contradicting both the sheriff and Gary Oldham. Very, very suspicious indeed. I was publishing articles about the crash in the Reader weekly and alternative newspaper in Duluth. And when I picked up on Christopher Bolin's observation that the FBI showed up at preternatural speed, I began a backward calculation. The plane actually took off, the Wellsville plane, at 9:37. The crash occurred at 10:22. In order for the FMM, Gary Oldham flew up and didn't even locate the crash site until 11. He didn't even obtain notice of the crash site until 11 a.m. and didn't notice anyone. He didn't notify the FBI. He came down and got the fire chief and took him out to find a way to get in there. How could the FBI possibly have shown up by noon? I did a backward calculation. Bob Duke, my editor, made me go over it again and again and again. In order for the FBI to have been on the crash scene by noon, they had to have taken off from St. Paul at the same time the Senator plane took off. And I have observed, with those remarkable powers of prognostication, they ought to be in the stock market making lots and lots of money. But then, for all I know, they already are. So we have a vast number of vicinity. It was a very special case. And what appears to have happened is John Costello, who has a PhD in electromagnetism, and I have both inferred, it appears they used a high-tech electromagnetic weapon to create a powerful energy field. And what they heard popping were the computerized components in the plane. It would take out the navigation system, it would take out the communication system, it would disable the loud call warning device. The effects they could have on humans are comparably serious. They can bring about a loss of consciousness, the incapacity to exercise voluntary muscle control, and even death. Something happened, and it appears to have been that this surge of energy, which not only caused all those popping sounds, flipped the solenoids as switches to control the pitch, and put the plane below idle. So that it was gliding after that point in time when it crashed. And having done their deed, the Kurds in the van with a weapon hightailed it out of the area. I am convinced that this was a very small-scale operation, that the only ones involved at the top were Dick Cheney, Karl Rove, and Donald Rumsfeld. It could have been as simple a matter as the member of the board of directors of Charter Aviation making a call to Dick Cheney to let him know that Paul Wellstone would be on the plane. He could, in turn, make contact with Raytheon, which not only owns Beechcraft, which manufactures the King Air A100, but also owns multiple patents for directed energy weapons. The use of the weapon could explain not only the popping sounds, turning the props below idle, the melted area in the ice region in the atmosphere, but complemented by what I am now convinced had to have been the interior of the plane being coated with either magnesium or thermite or something the equivalent. When the plane crashed, the fuselage burst into flame, completely independent of the fuel being carried in the wings. It burst into flame and it burned so intensely for 7 hours. They could do nothing about it. They couldn't even recover the bodies until the following day. So how did the FBI possibly announce that evening that there were no signs of terrorist attack? The NTSB itself would not conclude that the cause of the crash had been pilot error for another year. And how could you possibly know there were no signs of terrorist attack if you did not even know the cause of the crash? This is the kind of charade that we have come to expect from our government, I'm sorry to say. We find many other instances. We find it in relation to the assassination of JFK, for example, where we've all heard of the magic bullet. The theory that a bullet entered at the base of his neck, passed through his neck, hitting no bony structure, exited his throat, went into the back of John Connolly's shattered his rib, exited his